I had a really stable family. My mother, was a housekeeper, par excellence, and a cook and everything. So that made all the difference. That stability went with me wherever I went.
They say back in Texas I was born, and not in Tennessee.
School and church are the biggies, that probably for me growing up. And in school, well, I knew immediately that I was probably way ahead of the other kids in many ways, intellectually and so forth. My mother read to me from day one, and my dad was drafted in the Navy, and she had me, just me and her, and living with our grandmother and others, but we had a bedroom, and she read to me a lot to keep me quiet, probably, I don't know. But she got me so that I, loved books and loved reading and loved learning. And so that was another thing that almost none of the other kids had in those various communities that I moved around in.
And every since that day I've known I'm working my way back home.
For me, I guess helping the family and becoming self-sufficient as I grew up. That's where I was headed, and had no idea what that meant. First, it meant I could easily go out and sit on a tractor and drive around and around and around and get paid $10 a day. I could do that. So now what? And the next thing is, I was pretty good at keeping the tractors going. And so beginning of grade, maybe into grade 11, 10, we went back to Happy. So into grade 10 or so, my Sunday school teacher came to me and said, would you like to work at my shop? And it was a shop, he was a dealer for Case tractors and all the implements, something like here, And he said, what I need is a parts washer. That was the name of my job, parts washer. And there was only a mechanic or two and a welder and a parts guy and the boss. There weren't many people working in this place. And so I became the parts washer, and the mechanic was quite an older guy. Probably he was 60, but 60 was way older then than it is now, believe me. And he took me under his wing, and he taught me all about taking these motors and transmissions apart and putting them back together properly. And he made a mechanic out of me in not too long of a time. And I could do these on my own. And even before that, when I was 17 or so, I took the truck and the trailer and went out and picked up tractors in the field and brought them back, and did it responsibly and well at that age. And so by the time grade 12 was well into grade 12, I was thinking that, and I thought this a long time, that I wanted to be a Baptist minister. And there's a whole story of that. But I looked around, and where would I go? Well, Wayland Baptist College wasn't that far away. And one of the communities I'm sure you haven't explored is Plainview, Texas. Talk about a depressing place there. But they grow cotton and all kinds of things. It's a great farming community, but out in the flat prairies as well. But when I went to this Baptist college, it wasn't very long until I discovered that there were two levels of this operation. Up here at the top, the professors and the preachers and the evangelists having sex with the students as much as possible. And so I had approaches both from male and female professors who pinch me on the ass or all kinds of things and make it clear what they wanted. And I even went on a trip once where there was several went to Washington, D.C. to it was a child and youth conference or something. And one of the professors made a real heavy-duty pass at me, and I never had guys making passes at me before. But I learned about that, and it wasn't of interest to me, but it made me realize real quickly that maybe this ministry stuff, there's another layer to it I hadn't seen before, and it wasn't what I was interested in. So well before the year was over, the first year, I had decided to move on. And by coincidence, that year, first year of university, I got assigned to a room. Everybody had a roommate. And my roommate was a really good friend of mine from one of the places I'd lived, Amarillo, Texas. I was there 1 year. And Tommy was my roommate, and he just showed up in the room, and there we were. We were roommates. So he was from a fairly wealthy family, and he had a really nice, fairly new car. And so we drove around and did all kinds of things. But along toward the end of the year, one of the things we did is that we got, intellectuals then smoked pipes. And so one of the things we were intellectuals, we went down to the tobacco store, and there were tobacco stores then and all over, and bought a pipe and some tobacco, and we tried it out, and it wasn't that great first shot, but somehow someone from the campus saw us smoke these pipes in his car and told the dean. And so the dean called us in. It was very few days before the end of the semester. He said, boys, he said, I've had a report about this smoking, and it's against your pledge, so I'm going to have to ask you not to re-register next year. So we weren't kicked out, but we were just kind of like shunned or something. So I went to West Texas State after that, but that was my kind of loop through being a Baptist minister. Once I left there, I met my to-be wife fairly shortly thereafter. And so religion or anything like that was the least of my concern for a long time. But as I got older, I was interested in other religions like Buddhism and Hinduism and so forth. And so I was lucky enough to be able to study some of those in some depth. And so I'm not a subscriber to any of those things, but I found very important elements of my present self as I went along and explored those. I guess I don't necessarily find it amazing that I came from there to here, because I never planned anything truly. I mean, I wanted to go to university, so I went for that reason I just explained. But once you get to university, then there's a lot of interesting stuff I never heard of here. And so now you're trapped. If you're smart and you're ambitious and you don't know where you're going, then studying stuff and learning stuff is really the way to go. And so that's what I did. I went to university. I got married early, and she was a university, she was an artist, went to university, so along we went, and opportunities came up, and I took them, and the next thing I knew, I was going to graduate school. And always hanging over my head, of course, is the draft. That was always there. And always hanging over my head was finances. If I didn't get fellowships, then I couldn't go to get a PhD. So those are pretty heavy things to hang over your head, but I handled them fine. I was able to get a fellowship that was paid really well and go to a third-rate university and get a PhD. And that gave me credentials to do other things that I couldn't do without it. And that's one of the amazing things to me as I look back on life is how many of those opportunities came up, and I didn't know how important they were at the time to take this pathway or that pathway. And so it's one of the interesting things about life is that, there are many ways you can go anyway, to end up in all kinds of different places. There's not a lot that I miss because I guess I actually have grief about how much Texas has changed and how much its place in the country has changed since I was really young. And I know that it was probably much more racist than everything else, but I was growing up in a totally white segment of Texas Panhandle. And so race wasn't, to me, ever a big deal. My mother definitely taught that you didn't use the N-word and you treated everybody equally. And that was the way it was. And so I bought that and I practiced it. And I heard other people being racist, for instance, but to me, it never penetrated in any way. It was just like, okay, they're crazy and leave them alone. And so that, for me, began to break down in graduate school in universities where there was a lot of thought, a lot of, protests and all that. And then you wake up and have to evaluate. It's like, oh, wait a minute, they're kind of right. So when you start changing in that culture, you become, you don't fit anymore. You can't fit. You can either go and fight against the culture or leave it or buy into it. There aren't too many other choices. I was ready to leave it. I'd long since changed my mind. I was in the middle of a war. I was willing to die for the freaking country. And I was given an opportunity to come to Canada and teach in a university and have a green card and all that stuff. And become a citizen if I chose. And Ann and I jumped at that chance, and we've been here ever since, and really happy that we made the choice.
Sometimes I get mired in time, and then I can't see back. But if I keep on keeping on, it leads me to the track.